This is Christian Gomez from the New American Magazine, and today we're with Alex Newman, our foreign correspondent, who's coming to us live from Poland at the COP24 conference. So, Alex, what have been the latest developments in the last 24 hours since we last spoke?
Thanks very much, Christian. The fun development is that it's been snowing all day. It snowed all night, and then obviously that's because Al Gore has arrived or is arriving later today. This is very very well known phenomenon. It's known as the Gore Effect, and whenever Gore comes to give a lecture about the dangers of global warming, it seems God must have a wonderful sense of humor because it starts snowing, and today was no exception. It has been snowing all day. It's just wild amounts of snow. The drive over here was really fun. And so, we all kind of realized that this is because Gore showed up. So that's the fun developments. On a more serious note, the UN negotiators, all the climate dignitaries, the lower level people are furiously working right now. They have a deadline of 5 p.m. Europe time to come up with the draft of the agreement that they plan to seal the deal here regarding the Paris Agreement, right? So basically, they're coming up with the rules for how they're going to implement these so-called commitments that they made in Paris. They have this kind of half pseudoscience, half witchcraft voodoo. If we cut this much CO2, we're going to be able to reduce the temperature by 1.5 degrees over pre-industrial levels by 2050. They come up with these bizarre formulas. Which of course have always turned out wrong. But so now they're going to develop the rules for implementing this. How much cuts in CO2 emissions do different governments need to impose on their people versus how much money do governments need to hand over to third world governments in the United Nations to pay for their climate sins, their carbon sins. And today we've really spent a lot of time just walking around and chatting with people, and that's been a lot of fun too.
So, regarding cutting CO2 emissions and climate sins, how have the dignitaries that are arriving and that have arrived done with regards to cutting their carbon emissions? I'm sure that they've arrived on flying magic carpets and so forth, clean energy to get here,
exactly.
right?
That is exactly right, Christian. They showed up here on magic carpets that are completely carbon neutral, right? They rode their bikes from the airport where their magic carpets landed to here in Katowice, where the UN center is. But actually, in reality, of course, they flew in on private jets. They flew in on first class, business class, expensive tickets. And of course, they arrive in their big fleets of tinted windows, limos, big caravan and sirens and all the rest of it. The hypocrisy here, Christian, is off the charts. I mean, they're blasting the heat because, of course, it's literally freezing outside, right? It's snowing and it's frozen. So obviously it needs to be like, a tropical paradise in here. So they're blasting, just pumping the heat in here like it's going out of style. Of course, Poland uses mostly coal power, which I think is fantastic. But, all the people here are lecturing us about how evil coal is. And they've got, instead of walking up the steps, they've got escalators, coal-fired escalators, so that the climate dignitaries don't have to trouble themselves walking up any steps, heaven forbid. You've got caviar, you've got champagne, you've got unbelievable gourmet dishes, what do you call that, uncooked beef tartare, and these wonderful little hors d'oeuvres. It's quite a party. You can see why these people like to go around every year and have these wonderful things in these exotic locations and be catered to. But the climate hypocrisy is off the charts. And I saw an estimate that the UN itself came up with that this summit was going to use something like the amount of energy that 10,000 American homes would use in a year. But of course, that doesn't take into account their private jets. That doesn't take into account their airfare or the amount of CO2 that's emitted. And so it's a fraction of the amount of CO2 they'll actually be emitting. And I say this all with a caveat. There's nothing wrong with CO2. I can't tell you how many scientists I've talked to who call CO2 the gas of life. We need much more CO2. Of course, that's why farmers pump it into their greenhouses, because plants were designed to live in an environment that has more CO2 in it than our current atmosphere does. In fact, Trump's climate advisor, Dr. William Happer. I had an opportunity to interview him a few years ago at a climate event that we were both speaking at. And he said plants are literally designed to operate in an atmosphere, in an environment with 4 to 5 times the level of CO2 that has. So all this, exposing their hypocrisy on the CO2 is not to say that there's anything wrong with CO2. It's just to expose the hypocrisy. They want us to ride our bicycles. They want us to not use any energy. They want to keep people in Africa poor, burning sticks and manure so they can cook their food. And yet they want to fly in here with private jets, and they want to ride around in fleets of limos and ride up escalators. It's really grotesque, actually, when you consider the poverty in the world and how these resources could have been used for something useful, actually.
You mentioned how Poland is mostly reliant on coal energy. In fact, the coal energy is using to light up the facility that you're in right now at the COP24 conference. So considering how Poland relies so much on coal energy, and how yesterday you have the Trump administration had a panel there at the conference in favor of coal and fossil fuels, what's been the reaction towards that position from the administration in favor of coal and fossil fuels? What's the media reaction like over there?
I mean, there's a lot of fury against the Trump administration. Yeah, most of the press section, I would say almost the entire press section. I often call it the cheerleading section, because more than media, these people are cheerleaders for what's going on here. But they are furious with the Trump administration. I mean, they kind of can't decide whether Trump is a joke or whether he's a climate criminal who needs to be arrested. We literally had a German guy today. We got it on camera. I asked him, what should we do about all the climate deniers? He said, lock them up. Lock them up. So that, there's literally this sentiment here that we need to put climate deniers in re-education camps and prosecute them for crimes against humanity. It's unbelievably ludicrous. But this sentiment is really spreading, Christian. Yesterday I was speaking. We got an interview with the head of the state-controlled, state-owned energy company here in Poland. I think it's PNIG or something like that. It's a massive conglomerate on the Warsaw Stock Exchange, and it's affiliated with the government. It's 70% owned by the Polish state. And so we asked the guy, so what do you think about all this? He said the market needs to decide. This fanaticism that politicians are going to tell us what kind of energy we need to use is crazy. If the market wants coal, if the market wants gas, if the market wants oil, that's what we should provide. The consumer should decide. The market should decide, not a bunch of politicians and bureaucrats who really don't understand these issues. So he was absolutely right. Presumably, he has at least much of the Polish state behind him. So you have this. Aside from the hysteria and alarmism, you have a growing movement among governments, among private citizens, realizing that this is a hoax. I was at the Brazilian booth yesterday, and I asked the guys there, so what does your president-elect think? Jair Bolsonaro, does he believe in man-made global warming? One of them quickly said, no comment, and then the other said, nah, I don't think he does. So he just appointed a foreign minister who says the man-made global warming hypothesis is a Marxist hoax. It's a Marxist scam. You have the Australian Prime Minister's top advisor saying that the man-made global warming theory is a UN ruse, is the term he used. At Trump's side event where they were promoting coal and oil, you had the Australian ambassador for the environment. He's trying to avoid me. He wasn't pleased with my question asking why they're playing along with this global warming scam that CO2 is bad. But, he was up there promoting some of the things that Australia is doing in terms of expanding their mining operations and expanding their energy, system. So a lot of change is happening here. I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to continue this ruse. Clearly, they've invested a lot. Clearly, there's a lot of people here who are mad at Trump, who are mad at the American people. Right? I mean, the anti-American hatred here is bad, and it's growing. You have them shouting about Indians, and you have them shouting about genocide and evil America. Of course, there's no protest about communist China, the most murderous government ever to curse humanity. No protest about Cuba, none of that. But always evil America. So it's really a grotesque spectacle, Christian. I wish people could see this stuff with their own two eyes. So that's why we're here. That's why we're going to be sending in more and more interviews so you guys can see this stuff, because you're not going to get this information from the fake news media at all. You got to stay tuned to the New American for more.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, Alex, for joining us, and I hope that you out there will catch these articles on thenewamerican.com and videos of Alex Newman, because as Alex stated, you will not find this news elsewhere. So, Alex, you take care, and we'll check in with you again tomorrow.